Hello, this lecture is a review of what was discussed in class on how communication is related to job seeking, specifically about your letters of interest and resumes. If you think about communication in the workplace, almost every problem in the workplace is a result of miscommunication or poor communication. If you learn to effectively communicate for yourself and advocate for yourself, you'll find that it's a skill that will help you develop happiness at work and possibly lead to advances or promotions. But for this class, we don't have any jobs yet in the health field. We're looking at how to get a job. So when you submit a letter for a job, or when you submit a resume for a job, you're going to submit a letter with the resume. And the letter that you submit has a purpose. The purpose of the letter is to make the person want to read your resume. It's supposed to highlight your best skills and qualities in relationship to the job. This means that for every job to which you apply, you will probably have a different letter, because in the letter you want to use words that are used in the job description. Your letter should have 3 paragraphs and should never be longer than a page to a page and a half. A page and a half is a very long letter where you're introducing yourself. You have to remember that the people who are reading your resume and letter typically receive hundreds of applications for one position. So you have to have a way to make your material stand out. One way to do that is to make sure you are thorough and specific, or thorough, accurate, and succinct. Your letter has 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph should introduce yourself and why you are writing. You want to say exactly why you're writing. You want to say, I am applying for the position of, as advertised in. You may want to give a little bit of information about yourself, like you're a senior graduating from Towson University, or you're looking to enter the field because you have a love or passion for whatever the company does. When you are introducing yourself, you need to remember that you are trying to show the company or organization what you bring to them, not what they can give you. So to say things like, I'm looking for an internship that'll help me grow as a professional, or I'm applying for this position because it will look good on my resume, those are not appropriate things to put in your letter if you're trying to convince them to give you an interview. They want to know what you bring to them. Do you have unique characteristics, unique skills? Do you have academic background? Do you have experiences? What is it that you have that will benefit them? The second paragraph is where you highlight up to 3 items from your resume. You need to choose up to 3 items that are relevant to this position. So again, this part of your letter is probably going to change based on different applications or different internships to which you're applying. You should never do more than 3 items that are in your resume, and you should not be talking about things that are not in your resume. You might start this section with statements like, when you look at my enclosed resume, or as you review my resume, you will find, and then you identify the up to 3 items that you want them to see. And then the last paragraph, the third paragraph that you write, summarizes why you are the best candidate, restating what you're bringing to them. If you think back to Health 315, you have an introduction, a body, and a summary, and this letter follows something very similar. It introduces yourself and identifies, at the top of the second paragraph, identifies 3 things you're going to discuss. You discuss those 3 items briefly. You summarize what you've just discussed and remind them why you're the best candidate. So that is the way you write a good letter of interest if you're looking for a position. Remember to be succinct and thorough, because they're getting a lot of applications, and in the beginning they only skim over the letter. A letter that's easy to read, that is thorough and succinct, gets a much better response than one that is too long. So you have your letter is awesome, and they're like, oh man, I'm going to put this on the side. I want to see this resume. So what they normally do is they'll read through 100 letters and they put everything on the side that they want to see. Sometimes they make 3 piles, and these could be electronic piles. A pile of, I definitely don't want to see this resume. A pile, I definitely want to see this resume. And I'm not sure if I want to see this resume. You always want to be in the section or the pile that says, I want to see your resume. So let's say your letter was so awesome that you're in that pile where you're going to have them look at your resume. So the purpose of your resume is to get an interview, and that means you need to represent who you are and what you bring to the organization. Again, it's all about what you bring to them. This document represents who you are. So if there are spelling and grammar errors, I'm 99.9% sure you're going in the pile that I don't want to interview. This is your best representation of your work. So if you give me work that's sloppy, does not look good, has spelling and grammar errors, I don't want to interview you because that's your best. And if that's your best, you're going to take way too much time to train and get on track for what we need to have done. So spelling and grammar errors typically are a no-no. In fact, there are interns who have lost their interview possibilities with an organization because they had spelling and grammar errors in their letters. So even though we go through and tell you to correct things, sometimes students decide they know better and they don't correct items, and there have been several occasions where students were not interviewed because of spelling and grammar errors. It needs to be visually appealing, and we're going to look at some examples in a little bit of what I mean by visually appealing. One item is that it needs to not be too crowded. And that's hard to do until I see your resume and I can give you feedback on how to move things around to make it look better. It should highlight skills and experience. The most important item should be to the left because we read left to right. Alignment should be to the beginning of the words because it's easier for people to read. You don't want it cluttered. You want your letter and job to match each other and match to the organization or job to which you're applying. And again, you're trying to sell yourself and be honest because you're trying to convince them that you need a job. You're the best person for this position. And when they look at your resume, what you want to have happen is, this is the person I want to interview. So again, there's going to be piles. There's going to be, I definitely don't want to interview this person. There's going to be a pile where I definitely want to interview this person. And then there will be a pile of maybe. Again, you want your resume to be so awesome, stand out from the others, that they say, I want to interview this person. So these are some basics. These are things to which you will be graded. The first one is the letterhead. The letterhead at the top has your name, maybe city, state, and email. Most people do not put their addresses on resumes anymore because they're posted electronically and you don't know who could see them. So if you post your resume to LinkedIn, you have no idea who's going to see that. So a lot of people no longer put their addresses in their resume at the top. When you are applying for your internships, you need to use your Towson University email because that will let them know that you're from Towson and they're going to open your email. If you don't use your Towson University for this position internship, sometimes your emails are overlooked. However, beginning with this resume, you should start to use your Towson University and some other email address. And then after your internship, as you're applying for jobs, you need to stop using your Towson email address because eventually you lose your email account with Towson. The letterhead on your letter and the letterhead on your resume should be identical. They should be the same. It makes your material look better. It makes it look more professional. So those two items should be the same. If you don't have them the same, you will lose points. These are some possible sections that you might have in your resume. There is no one right way to do a resume. You have to look at all the options that are available online, in the internet, in Microsoft Office. There are tons of examples for you to review. You need to do the one that you feel best matches you, but you need to make sure that it's thorough and accurate and succinct. So those are some items to remember. Remember, you should not elaborate on jobs that everyone knows. So if you're a cashier or a carry-out person or a server, everybody knows what those people do in their position, so you don't need to elaborate on those jobs. The next thing shows reading from left to right, and the left, this shows you how you could have columns, but as you see, the words are all aligned to the left, so the first letter of all the words are aligned. The reason I show you this is you need to figure out what is the most important item for your reader to see. In most cases, it's your job title. So when you look at these three options, the first one is the best way to set up everything. Your job title is all the way to the left because that's most important. It tells the reader most about what you're doing. The second one, dates of employment, that typically is not a good item to put on the left because it doesn't really tell the people anything. They're much more interested in what you know and know how to do. Sometimes people like to put the company name first because it looks better. That would be your second choice, although it really is not the first choice. The first choice is the one that's first on this list. And whichever you choose to do, you have to do the same thing for every job. This is an example of not easy to read and easy to read. So on the top sample, it shows you right to left, that everything's justified to the right. And the left margins are all messy. And what happens then is it's very difficult for the reader. If I'm reading 100 resumes, this is hard to read. None of your textbooks look like this. When you write letters to people, they don't look like this. So to make this on your resume, it actually makes it more difficult for the person to read, which makes it less likely that you're going to get interviewed. If you look at the bottom one, these words are all justified to the left. So as you see, there's a center column. This is not all the way to the left. To the left, you might have your job title, but you want to have something on the right. You can do that. But the words have to be justified at the first letter. And so this would be called justified to the left. The top one is justified to the right. So this is an example of how to make it not appealing versus appealing. Your font should be no smaller than 11 point because it's too difficult to read. And sometimes people will print out resumes and have them on paper. So you don't want to go smaller than 11 point. Your margin should be 1 inch. If you're at a page and 2 lines, don't make your margin smaller. Try to figure out how to put more on the second page or less on the second page. But do not make your margin smaller than 1 inch. Inch margins are normal in everything we read. It makes it look less cluttered and it makes it easier to read. And the 3 fonts that you should consider are Roman New Times, Arial, or Calibri. They're the easiest to read. Those are the fonts that most people use most of the time. There are other things that we discussed in class that hopefully you have notes on those items. This lecture does not cover everything we went over in class, but it is designed to simply give you some information to review the kind of items that are important in your resumes. I look forward to seeing your letters and resumes, and remember, you need to get an 80% or higher in order to go on to the internship application process.